Do you have anything else you want to add on the protein side, though, Brenda? Like I said, you did get shorted in particular. Is there anything else that we ought to be paying attention to? I mean, poultry is one of those things that's constantly going to be in the news. You focused in on turkeys, but obviously that makes me irritated are everybody talking about eggs, eggs, eggs. To me, I always thought poultry was one of the fastest rebuilding proteins that we've got, period.
Well, from a protein point, it is. I mean, from a biological component, it takes a lot less time to do it. The issue becomes, though, is that like when we look at avian influenza, the first outbreak started in 2022, and we had in last year 23 we had actually 2 outbreaks. So we haven't been able to stop the outbreak issue. So we can build back. It's when you have to then euthanize because of it, it's creating issues that way.
Not to get in front of you, Dwayne, but is the industry continuing to be interested in rebuilding, or have some of them tapped out and said, that's enough? I would rather have an empty barn than be dealing with this.
I don't feel like I can answer that from a national or even really specifically from a Wisconsin. I don't have the data on that one, so I'd be answering only anecdotally, and that's not really a fair question answer.
There you go.
Question for Leonard. Dwayne, farmer from Cambridge, Wisconsin. With all the volatility we've always suffered through with dairy and this processing that's coming on, don't you feel that pipeline probably by 26 will get filled up with that growth being developed, and we're going to be probably milk out of this Midwest region, even down south, to fill maybe as far as Oklahoma and some of that new processing? And then your thoughts too on growth management. Is there still a possibility to have growth management like we talked about 5 years ago with the dairy industry?
So I'll do my best to unpack that incrementally here. When we look at movement of milk, a lot of times it's incremental, right? So it'll be like small geography will pull from the next neighbor, and then the next neighbor, right? So and we're seeing that even recently as we take a look at the mid. Is that we are getting some milk pulled out, but again, it is that incremental sort of effect there. I might have you come back up and ask all of the question again, just to make sure I get all of it. On the asking about when that demand will be met. So quick story on that. When I'm out and presenting and get asked this question on either replacements or in what this how this demand is going to be met. The two big options are that either one, enough supply chain coordination between the producer and the processor, right? That they're timing this out already, right? So that way the producers that they're going to be sourcing milk from, they've already planned out, been working with over some period of time. So when they need to essentially turn on that faucet, right? To them, already planned and coordinated. The other portion of that is how much milk they're just going to pull from the open market, right? And both of those things kind of determine where our price forces upward kind of come from, right? The more coordination that's already been happening, already planned and in the works, right? We're not going to be pulling as much from the open market. As that happens, we're not going to see as big of bump in the short term in price in which we normally would see. As I go out and talk to folks, I'll ask them how many people in the audience know of anybody that's deliberately shorted. I've surveyed just anecdotally well over 1,000 people over the last year or two. And previous to last week, I had a total of 5 people. Over the last week and a half, I have now had. So either that tells you that people maybe have went to the well one too many times on their terminal breeding programs, right? Or some other factor is happening there. And as we look at supplying this demand here for these processors, when we look at where our changes in milk production are happening, we're seeing, right, from our reports that they're happening where a lot of these cheese plants are. Cheese plants manufacturing is happening as well, right? So I think there's some, coordination planning, things like this happening there. Supply chain management, growth management, I'm going to punt that later on. I think that's a good policy question for him, and he's worked on it a lot historically. I do think that if, just from a growth standpoint right now, I think you're going to see that old 80-20 rule, right? Where the majority of the milk supply that is going to be new or brought on is likely going to be percent of larger farms that are out there.
Cutie, what kind of cheese are those new plants coming online producing? Rainbow, sugar? I mean,
I don't know.
Why doesn't anybody know?
Yeah, that
Just
would be my
commodity
assumption.
cheese,
Yep.
whatever they can.
Nope.
Can they retool and build something and produce something different, John? And do we know if they've got contracts for all of that they are promising to produce? Domestic or international? These are the great unknowns. Did all the dairies that promised to Kansas get built? Yeah. Did all the dairies that got promised to Kansas get built? No.
I don't know. I know some have.
Tough to build a dairy these days, even with a new process. See, I feel like I'm grabbing my own recorder. Yep, go ahead. One more question.
Okay, question for Leonard again. What advancements in technology are driving the increase in milk production per cow?
So milk production per cow, and specifically components, a lot of it is genetics, and then also on that feeding side, on that animal husbandry, animal management side, our producers are just remarkable at getting better and better all the time. So I think that's been some of the biggest driving factors there. Cow comfort, things like this, just kind of that all-encompassing factor, if you will.
Go ahead.
John, a couple questions for you and then one for Brenda. So soybeans, how much does quality of the U.S. soybean make in the market the difference? I've heard, South America, they can produce all these soybeans, but the quality isn't very good, well in storage. So does that provide some safety in that exports from the U.S.? And then the second point was, how does the 45Z and some of the soybean oil, does that help some of these crush projects that are, I would say, probably on hold right now, the margins on that? And then Brenda, for you, is there any chance that the quotas on these beef imports get taken off to help prices? I guess that's, so I just had to ask it. I didn't know there was a quota on beef, so anyway.
All right, first off, on the quality side of things, again, that's why if you've seen recently, of U.S. beans to China, and here again, that's a blending purpose. They bring those beans in, mix them with the Brazilian beans to improve the quality. That was one of the reasons that we were also seeing some good strength in the market today. China actually came out with the rumor is some potential new quality standards today for those Brazilian beans. That U.S. beans a little bit more acceptable in that regard. So that's a big key component we'll have to continue to watch. The other part regarding the 45Z and the ethanol or the tax credit, obviously if you've seen the news at all, the used cooking oil imports exploded, took advantage of the current administration, how they could bring that fuel source in or that feed source in for the sustainable aviation fluid and as well as the other biofuels. 45Z came through and with its original plan was to make used cooking oil or sources for the feedstock for that not domestic, in other words, from the United States and eligible. And that's why we saw the big explosion in soybean oil prices, because realistically up until that package kind of came out, the news and the ethanol, or excuse me, in the biofuel side of things, especially that soybean crush, which is going to be so key for U.S. production, has been more negative than positive, I would say. It was on more of a negative tone, and that's something that weighed on bean prices fairly heavily going into the fall until we've seen this most recent turn of weather. So now, like I said, we've got some policy out there. Now we're at the point where it's going to go through the hearing period. We got to see what the Trump administration wants to do with it. Again, kind of the stance is maybe a little more in terms of its policies, so we'll have to see how those come out going forward. But that's going to be a major driver because a lot of this production that was coming online for the biofuel side, for the soybean processing side, has kind of been either tabled or put back in the back burner as we've been kind of waiting for this direction and now the Trump administration in terms of those tax credits for the biofuels.
Go, Brenda.
Okay, so you, in 25, given the fact that we're gonna run up against that again. You know, we're gonna have strong imports. We just don't have production. We have high prices. Imports basically for ground, or to mix with for ground. The issue becomes whether or not we'll still have that tariff. That's a trade policy. I mean, unless something changes, it's still going to be there, and it's still going to be something that we're going to have to deal with in 25. But on policy, that we'll ask that this afternoon. I'll try to.
Jason, then we'll wrap it with Jason.
I want to go back to what you were saying. This is short. Sorry, I'm tall. Do you think that there's going to be any modification to any of those carbon sequestration pipeline projects? I mean, when we were waiting for 45Z to kind of like your ability to produce SAF is essentially tied to those pipelines, and now that might be opening up a little bit. That new GREET model is a little bit more flexible than we had thought it was going to be, and maybe there's an opportunity for Wisconsin to start playing in the sandbox if we're not as tied to pipelines as we might have Biden administration.
Yeah, that's going to be something also that's a side part of this too, is with the pipelines in terms of what's happening with the carbon factor. We'll have to see. Okay, I mean, right now there's a lot of things, there's a lot of variables in the markets, and I know just working with producers right now, we just got a lot. And I think the market's priced a lot of those questions in one way or another. So we'll have to see how the plan goes forward on that, you know, until we get a true direction from the Trump administration, the new EPA, what's going to be happening there. I think some of these plans are going to be kind of on the table at this time frame as maybe, again, we move away, you know, the Clean Energy Acts and things of that nature. So that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on going forward at this time frame. But again, not a real clear answer for you on that at this moment, because I don't have that clear answer as well, because we just don't have that overall base direction figured out yet.
Teed that up perfectly, because that's what we'll talk about this afternoon.
Thanks.